The wind howled like a wounded beast, thrashing through the trees that stood like sentinels on the desolate cliffs of Lantern Island. Rain fell in sheets, turning the paths into rivers of mud and the air into a misty tapestry of despair. This storm was unlike any the islanders had seen, a monstrous tempest that cut off their communication with the mainland, leaving them to the mercy of the elements and the darker, more malevolent entities that lurked in the shadows. Mara sat by the window of her creaking old house, watching the trees bend under the assault of the storm. The weathered clapboards creaked ominously, a chorus of strained voices echoing through the wooden frame. She had lived on Lantern Island her whole life, inheriting her small cottage from a long line of women who had withstood the island's mysteries and perils. Yet nothing in the whispered tales of her ancestors could have prepared her for the nightmare that began 3 nights ago. A heavy knock rattled the door, barely audible over the roaring storm. Mara, her heart leaping in her chest, hesitated before unbolting the latch to reveal Jonas, dripping wet and wild-eyed. Jonas was one of the island's few remaining fishermen, a rugged man whose life on the sea had carved lines of experience and hardship into his face. "Mara," he gasped, stepping into the shelter of her home. "They're back. The ghouls have returned." Jonas's words were met with silence save for the storm's unrelenting howl. Mara's face was a mask of dread, her mind racing back to stories of a time when the sea claimed lives, not just with its fury, but with monsters that rose from its depths, ghouls that fed on the living under the cover of night. "How many?" Mara asked, her voice steady despite the fear gnawing at her insides. "Dozens, maybe more. The storm has woken them," Jonas replied, his voice a gravelly whisper tinged with urgency. Though the island was small, home to just 50 souls, its history was expansive and dark. Lantern Island had been settled centuries ago by those seeking solitude, but it quickly gained a reputation for strange occurrences and unexplained disappearances. Some islanders believed the ghouls were restless spirits, angered by the transgressions of the living, while others dismissed them as myths. Until now. "We must gather everyone," Mara declared, resolve hardening her features. "We can't let the ghouls pick us off one by one." They set out into the storm, Mara leading the way with a lantern that sputtered defiantly against the wind. As they made their way to the village center, their path illuminated in ghostly, swinging arcs. They called out to their neighbors, a rallying cry in the desolate night. In the small community hall, the islanders gathered, their faces pale in the flickering light. Fear was a palpable presence, binding them together with a shared dread. Among the gathered was Eliza, a woman of sharp intellect and a teacher of the island's children. Her quick mind and resourcefulness were well known, and Mara turned to her for guidance. "What are we facing, Eliza?" Mara asked, hoping for a plan, a thread of hope to cling to. Eliza, calm despite the chaos, nodded. "These creatures are bound to the sea. They rise with the tide, driven by an ancient curse. If we can hold out until the storm passes, perhaps we can find a way to banish them for good." "But how?" Jonas interjected, his frustration boiling over. "They're relentless, and there's so many of them." Eliza's eyes were intense, a spark of determination within. "The old church," she suggested, her voice low but strong. "Its walls are thick stone, and the grounds are consecrated. It may offer us some protection." With few alternatives, the group decided to make their stand at the church, its spire a lone sentinel against the raging night. They ventured out again, the storm clawing at their clothes, and reached the church as darkness deepened. The heavy oak doors were thrown open, welcoming the sodden group into its hollow sanctum. Inside, the air was cool and still, the storm reduced to a distant roar beyond the thick stone walls. As they secured the doors and windows, Eliza and Mara searched the dusty tomes that lined the church's ancient shelves, hoping to find any mention of the ghouls and how to dispel them. Night fell fully, and with it came the dreadful sound, a keening wail rising over the storm, the calling card of the ghouls. The islanders huddled together, a collective shiver running through them as the wails drew closer, scratching at their sanity. In the flickering candlelight, old Mr. Harding, a recluse with long, tangled hair and a reputation for madness, began to murmur to himself. His mutterings, usually ignored, suddenly took on a chilling clarity. "They seek vengeance," Harding whispered, his eyes glazed over with memories only he could see. "The sea is their grave, and we are their trespassers." Mara's attention snapped to him. "What do you know, Harding?" she demanded, a thread of hope intertwined with her exasperation. The old man chuckled, a sound both haunting and childlike. "The book," he said, pointing a bony finger at the altar. "Look for the book with the broken seal. It holds the secrets of the sea and those who sleep beneath it." With this cryptic clue, Eliza and Mara scoured the collection again until they found a tome, its leather cover cracked and worn, bound with an ancient, frayed seal. As Eliza opened it, the room seemed to breathe, the islanders leaning in as one. The tome spoke of an ancient mariner's curse, one cast upon those who dared to plunder the sea's bounty without heed for the spirits who guarded its depths. The ghouls were the guardians of this curse, forced to roam as long as the storm tethered them to the living world. To break the curse, Eliza read aloud, her voice steady against the fearful whispers. One must return that which was taken and offer a tribute of light to the sea. As they deliberated on what could have been taken, Jonas's eyes widened with realization. "The lighthouse!" he exclaimed. "It hasn't been lit in years. Its light once warded off ships and guided us safely home. Maybe that's what the sea demands." Mara nodded, a plan beginning to form. "Then we must relight it. The old kerosene reserves should still be there. If we can light it, perhaps it will satisfy the ghouls." Yet the task was fraught with danger. The lighthouse stood at the far end of the island, a lonely sentinel battered by the storm and darkness. Venturing out meant facing the ghouls head-on. "I'll go," Jonas volunteered, his voice firm with determination. Mara shook her head. "Not alone. We'll need everyone to make this work." As a group, they prepared for the perilous journey, arming themselves with makeshift weapons, old fishing spears, fire pokers, and lengths of iron. With a final collective breath, they stepped into the storm, determined to reach the lighthouse before the ghouls breached the church's defenses. The journey was harrowing, the rain lashing at them like an unyielding scourge. But worse was the darkness slithering between the trees, the shadows of ghouls, their eyes glowing like distant lanterns, hungry and relentless. As they approached the lighthouse, the air thickened with a sense of foreboding. The ghouls moved like a tide around them, their hissing calls mingling with the storm. Despite the terror, Mara led them onward, Jonas at her side, the beacon's imposing structure looming ahead. They reached the lighthouse base, its door hanging ajar, a gaping maw into the unknown. Inside, the air was still and silent, but for the distant moan of the storm. They ascended the narrow spiral stairs, each step a haunting echo of those who'd climbed before. At the top, they found the lantern room, its glass shattered but the metal base intact. Jonas quickly located the old kerosene canisters, miraculously still half full. Mara struck a match, the small flame dancing in her trembling hand as it caught the wick. Outside, the storm was unrelenting, the ghouls amassing in greater numbers. As the lighthouse flame burst into life, a beam of golden light cut through the night, slicing the darkness and sending the ghouls into a frenzy. Their wails turned from triumph to torment, the light a searing brand of defiance against the sea's curse. "We did it!" Jonas cried, hope kindling in his heart for the first time in days. But their celebration was premature. A new horror awaited them, an enormous shadow rising from the depths beyond the cliff, a ghoul unlike any they had ever seen, its form massive and serpentine, an embodiment of ancient rage. The islanders froze, despair clawing at them anew. The lighthouse flame flickered, struggling against the storm's fury and the dark titan's presence. Mara's heart pounded in her chest, terror at its peak, yet in that moment, clarity struck. "The tribute!" She yelled over the cacophony. "We need the tribute!" Desperation made them swift, and they began to search the lighthouse for anything that could serve. Finally, Mara spotted an old, tarnished bell hanging in the corner, a relic of past warnings of lives once saved by its sound. Eliza nodded in agreement, her eyes meeting Mara's with shared understanding. Together, they hoisted the bell, its weight a staggering burden, yet within it lay their hope. They swung the bell over the lighthouse's edge, the light of the flame catching on its surface, turning it into a beacon of another kind. With a mighty push, they let it fall, the deep toll resonating through the storm, a clarion call of surrender and peace. The ghouls paused, their howls softening to a murmur. The Shadow Titan wavered, its form shimmering under the lighthouse's unwavering beam. Slowly, with a sigh that echoed the sea's eternal heartbeat, it sank back into the depths, taking with it the malevolent tide of ghouls. As dawn broke over the horizon, the storm abated, leaving behind a battered but relieved island. The inhabitants, wearied but triumphant, returned to the village, knowing they had faced not just their fears, but the island's darkest legacy, and prevailed. Yet, as the light of the new day cast long shadows over Lantern Island, a figure stood watching from the cliff, untouched by the relief of victory. Mr. Harding, his eyes no longer clouded, looked out to sea with a knowing smile. The island had bought its peace, but in the dance of shadows and light, Harding knew the sea held many secrets still. For the islanders of Lantern Island, this was but a chapter in a long unfolding tale, a reminder of the fine line between legend and reality. In the years to come, the lighthouse would be tended with renewed reverence, its flame a perpetual guardian over the sea's mysteries. The stories of that fateful night became legend, whispered among the islanders, a testament to their resilience and the enduring power of light over darkness. In the hearts of those who survived, the ghouls were no longer simply nightmares rising from the sea. They were reminders of the past and of the courage it took to face the unknown with the strength of unity and hope.